It was a crisp Monday morning when the crowd at Central City train station began to thicken with the usual rush of commuters. People in suits, students with headphones, and tired workers all moved with purpose, weaving through platforms and staircases without noticing much beyond their phones and timetables. But one person did notice. Leo Ramirez, a janitor who had worked the early shift at the station for over a decade, paused during his routine trash sweep when he spotted something unusual under one of the metal benches at Platform 7. It was a dark green backpack. Older, a bit worn, and definitely out of place. What caught his attention most was that it hadn't been there 30 minutes earlier when he passed by. Now it sat alone, zipped up tightly, with no one nearby. He glanced around. No one seemed to be watching it. No one looked concerned. Still, something about it made Leo uneasy. He radioed it in. Within minutes, transit security arrived. Officer Megan Chu, who had dealt with dozens of unattended bags over the years, approached with calm caution. "Standard procedure," she muttered as she and her partner assessed the situation. People were quietly redirected away from the bench while the perimeter was set. The officers approached the bag slowly, communicating clearly, hands steady. They knelt beside it and looked for any sign of who it belonged to. No tags, no initials, nothing. Megan reached out, placed one hand on the zipper, and began to open it carefully. That's when she heard it. A soft sound, a tiny, almost imperceptible whimper. She froze, her eyes meeting her partner's. The sound came again, like a high-pitched cry muffled by fabric. With renewed urgency but gentle hands, she unzipped the backpack completely. The fabric opened, revealing something no one had expected. A small, wide-eyed German Shepherd puppy, curled tightly in a nest of an old sweatshirt and a towel. His little body trembled, but he made no move to escape. Instead, he looked up at Megan with cautious trust, as if waiting to see whether she was friend or foe. Gasps came from nearby passengers. A child pointed. Megan's heart clenched. He couldn't have been more than 10 weeks old. "What in the world?" she whispered, then reached in and gently lifted the tiny pup into her arms. The weight of the moment was just starting to settle in when she noticed something else at the bottom of the bag, a piece of folded paper with handwriting visible through the fold. She didn't open it yet. She just held it. And in that moment, everyone knew this wasn't just a case of a lost pet. Something much deeper was going on. Officer Megan Chu held the tiny German Shepherd pup close to her chest, his small body trembling with uncertainty. His fur was warm but slightly matted, and his ears twitched at every sound echoing through the station. The moment felt oddly quiet now. The noise of the crowd had faded, replaced by a stillness only found when something serious, something human, unfolds in front of strangers. The puppy didn't bark. He didn't squirm. He just looked up at Megan with those dark, searching eyes, as if asking what was going to happen next. One of the passengers nearby stepped forward hesitantly. Is he okay?" they asked softly. "I think so," Megan replied, gently running a thumb over the puppy's head. "He's not hurt, just scared." Her voice was calm, but her mind was racing. Why would someone leave such a young, clearly trained puppy in a place like this? And why inside a backpack? Her partner, Officer Jordan Kim, was already examining the rest of the bag. He carefully removed a half-empty Ziploc of dry puppy food, a tiny rubber ball, and a folded towel that smelled faintly of home. Not a shelter, not the street, but somewhere warm. Finally, he picked up the folded note and handed it to Megan. She looked down at the paper in her free hand. It was a little crumpled and damp in one corner. The handwriting was uneven and slightly smudged. Whatever was written inside, it wasn't scribbled in a hurry. It had been written with care. "Do we open it now?" Jordan asked. Megan gave a slight nod, then slowly unfolded the paper. Her eyes moved across the words. "His name is Scout. I trained him as best I could. He was meant to serve, but I couldn't afford to keep going. Please help him find his purpose. He deserves more than I can give." She didn't speak right away. Her throat tightened as she read the words again, this time more slowly. There was no name signed at the bottom, no phone number, no clue about who had written it. But there was something even more powerful. It wasn't just the note that hit her, it was what the note didn't say. The struggle, the love, the quiet heartbreak of someone who couldn't hold on, but still tried to do right by the one soul that trusted them completely. Megan looked down at Scout, now resting quietly in her arms. Whoever left him behind hadn't given up. They had believed he still had a future. And now, so did she. Megan stood there for a moment, her fingers gently tracing the words of the note, as if they might reveal more than what was written. Her heart was heavy, a mix of confusion and compassion swirling inside her. The puppy, Scout, had begun to relax in her arms, his tiny head nestled against her chest, but Megan couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. She looked at Jordan, who was standing beside her, his face grim as he too read the note over her shoulder. "What do you think it means?" he asked quietly. Megan exhaled slowly, her gaze still locked on the crumpled paper. "It means someone cared, someone who couldn't afford to keep going, but still believed in this puppy's future. They didn't just abandon him, they left him with a purpose, a chance." Jordan nodded slowly, his expression softening. "But why leave him here, in a train station of all places? There's no sign of who left him, no way to trace this." Megan shook her head, still clutching the note in her hand. "I don't know, but I think they wanted him to be found. They wanted him to have a future." As they stood there, lost in their thoughts, several other officers began to gather around. Word had spread quickly among the station staff, and a small crowd of curious onlookers started to form nearby. It wasn't just the puppy that caught people's attention. It was the note. The raw emotion behind those few lines was palpable. Even from a distance, it was clear that something profound had occurred. "What happens now?" Jordan asked. Megan looked down at Scout, his eyes now closed, still resting peacefully. She felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility settle over her. This wasn't just another lost pet. This was a story of sacrifice, of someone who had tried, and failed, to do right by the animal they had trained. Someone who believed in this puppy's future, even if they couldn't be a part of it. "We'll take him to the shelter, get him checked out, see if we can find any more clues about who left him," Megan said, her voice steady but soft. "And maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to give Scout the future he deserves." As the officers carefully made their way through the crowd to leave, the station remained unusually quiet. The note had struck a chord with everyone who had read it. There were no answers, no easy solutions, but there was hope. And for Scout, hope was enough for now. The shelter was a short drive from the station, but it felt like a lifetime as Megan held Scout in her arms, his small body still trembling lightly, though he seemed more relaxed than before. The back seat of the patrol car was quiet, save for the soft sound of the puppy's gentle breathing. As they arrived at the shelter, a few of the staff rushed to greet them. A vet technician, a tall woman named Emma, immediately took Scout into her arms. "We'll take it from here," she said with a kind smile, her gentle demeanor easing some of Megan's lingering tension. Emma carefully placed Scout on the examination table, making sure to keep him comfortable as she ran through a routine checkup. Megan watched for a moment before stepping aside, her mind still racing. The note had left her with so many unanswered questions. Who had Scout's original owner been? Why had they left him behind at the train station, in such a vulnerable state? No clues had surfaced. The backpack had no identifying tags. No phone number, no address. Just the note, and the belief that someone had cared deeply for Scout, even if they couldn't keep him. Emma ran her fingers through Scout's fur, gently checking for any signs of injury or neglect. "He's in good health," Emma remarked, looking up at Megan. "A little underweight, but nothing major. Looks like someone really worked with him. He's well behaved." Megan nodded, her thoughts on the person who had given up so much for Scout. She imagined the pain of training a dog with such potential, only to face the heartbreaking decision to leave him behind. She couldn't help but wonder what had happened in that person's life, what had driven them to part with a puppy they clearly loved. "I don't think this was an easy choice for them," Megan said quietly. "Leaving him in a place like that, it wasn't an accident. They wanted him to have a chance." Emma didn't respond immediately, but her eyes softened as she placed a hand on Scout's head. "You're right," she said after a moment. "This wasn't just about giving up. It was about giving him a future." Megan stood silently, her gaze fixed on Scout. In that small, vulnerable puppy, she saw not just the result of someone's sacrifice, but also a chance for a new beginning. It was clear that Scout's story was far from over. Whoever had left him behind had done so with the hope that he could still make a difference in the world. And now, it was her turn to make sure that hope didn't go to waste. As the days passed, Scout began to settle into his new surroundings at the shelter. Despite the change of environment, he adapted quickly, his intelligent eyes never missing a movement, his ears always alert. It didn't take long for the staff to realize that this wasn't an ordinary puppy. One of the shelter workers, Sarah, was the first to notice just how well-behaved Scout was. One afternoon, while she was walking him around the outdoor play area, she gave him a command: "Sit." To her surprise, he obeyed instantly, dropping down onto his haunches without hesitation. His eyes never left her, as if he was waiting for the next command. "That's unusual," Sarah murmured under her breath, her eyebrows furrowed in surprise. She gave another command: "Stay." Once again, Scout obeyed, holding his position as if he'd been trained by a professional. Sarah called over to Emma, who was nearby. "You need to see this," she said, her voice full of awe. "This puppy is something else." Emma, who had been busy checking on other animals, hurried over. She watched closely as Sarah tested Scout's ability to follow basic commands. With each command, Scout responded without hesitation, his movements precise and calm. He wasn't just responding out of obedience. He seemed to understand the purpose behind every command, his focus unwavering. "I've worked with a lot of dogs here," Emma said, shaking her head in disbelief. "But this is different. He's been trained. Whoever had him before, they knew exactly what they were doing." The realization hit Megan like a wave. It wasn't just that Scout was a well-behaved puppy. He was showing signs of advanced training, skills typically reserved for working dogs, search and rescue dogs, service animals, or even canine units. This wasn't just a pet. Scout had a higher purpose, one that someone had clearly been grooming him for. Over the next few days, the shelter staff put him through more tests. They were astonished at his quick learning, his ability to track scents, and his alertness to every subtle change in his environment. He had a natural gift for obedience and understanding, traits that weren't common in most puppies his age. Megan returned to the shelter the following week, and she was greeted by a familiar sight. Scout sitting calmly at Emma's feet, his eyes trained on her every movement. The once nervous puppy had become a confident, disciplined dog. "He's incredible," Emma said as Megan approached. "There's no doubt about it. He was meant for something more." Megan couldn't help but smile, a sense of purpose flooding her heart. She knew the answer wasn't clear yet, but one thing was for sure: Scout had a future, and she was determined to help him find it. As word about Scout's remarkable abilities spread, the story began to take on a life of its own. The shelter posted an update online, sharing Scout's backstory, the discovery at the train station, and the incredible training he had already received. It wasn't long before the post went viral. Thousands of people shared the story, with many commenting on how moved they were by the puppy's resilience and the heartbreaking note that had been left behind. The public's response was overwhelmingly positive, with offers of donations, adoption, and even volunteer hours flooding in from all corners of the city and beyond. But it wasn't just the public's generosity that caught Megan's attention. One message in particular stood out among the hundreds of others. It was from the local K9 training unit, a respected organization that trained dogs for search and rescue operations, police work, and other specialized services. The message read, "We saw the video. Scout's training is impressive. We'd like to bring him in for an official evaluation to see if he has what it takes to join the K9 program. Please let us know if he's still available." Megan's heart skipped a beat. This was the opportunity Scout had been waiting for. The very thing that someone, perhaps the person who had left him behind, had hoped for when they trained him. To see Scout serve, to see him fulfill this purpose. Within hours, Megan was in touch with the K9 training unit. They were just as impressed with Scout's abilities as the shelter staff had been. "We've been looking for a dog with his potential," the lead trainer, Officer Ramirez, said over the phone. "He's exactly what we need." Megan arranged for a meeting the following week. When the trainers arrived at the shelter, they were immediately drawn to Scout. He greeted them with cautious curiosity, but quickly fell into his usual pattern of attentive obedience. The trainers could see it right away. The same qualities they sought in their K9 recruits. His focus, his drive, his natural instincts. Over the course of the next few days, Scout went through a series of evaluations, tracking scents, responding to commands, and even performing some basic search and rescue drills. It was clear to everyone involved. Scout was a natural. Megan watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride. Scout had been given a second chance, and it seemed like the life he had been trained for was finally within reach. She knew the journey ahead would be demanding, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of certainty about Scout's future. The following weeks were a whirlwind for Scout as he officially joined the K9 Academy. The shelter staff, especially Megan, watched with a mixture of pride and bittersweet emotion as the tiny puppy they had found under a bench grew into a confident, capable dog. But this was not just any training. It was a training that would prepare him to serve, to protect, and to help others in ways he never imagined. Scout's new handler, Officer Thomas Clark, was a seasoned K9 officer who had worked with many dogs over the years, but he knew right away that Scout was different. "He's got heart," Officer Clark said after their first training session together. "You can see it in his eyes. He's not just learning commands. He's internalizing them. This dog wants to work." The training was rigorous. Every day, Scout was put through his paces, tracking scents, searching through rubble, learning to navigate through crowds, and most importantly, building the bond of trust with Officer Clark. It wasn't just about being obedient. It was about instinct, partnership, and communication without words. In the beginning, Scout struggled with a few tasks. The noise of busy streets, the intensity of the exercises, and the pressure of expectations weighed on him. But he was resilient. Every time he made a mistake, he bounced back, focused on the next challenge. He had come so far from the trembling puppy in the backpack, and his determination was undeniable. Officer Clark watched with admiration. "He's got the instincts, and he's got the courage," he said. "It's just a matter of time before he's fully ready." Megan visited often, checking in on Scout's progress. She couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as she watched him perform, his training progressing faster than anyone had expected. She remembered the note, the words that someone had written with so much hope. It was clear to her now. Scout had been destined for something greater, and now, with the right guidance, he was on the path to fulfilling that destiny. As the weeks went by, Scout's bond with Officer Clark grew stronger. They became a team, working in sync as if they had known each other for years. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that Scout was meant for this life, and that his future was brighter than ever. When the day came for Scout's final evaluation, everyone held their breath. The trainers, the shelter staff, and even the public who had followed his journey. They all knew this was the moment that would determine his future. The day of Scout's final evaluation arrived. The K9 Academy's training grounds were filled with energy as the other officers and their dogs observed with anticipation. It wasn't just another day of training. It was the culmination of months of hard work, perseverance, and dedication. Megan stood quietly on the sidelines, watching as Officer Clark and Scout prepared for their final demonstration. She felt a knot in her stomach, a mixture of nerves and excitement. "Scout, ready?" Officer Clark asked, his voice steady as he crouched down to meet the dog's gaze. Scout's response was immediate. He looked up at Officer Clark with his dark, focused eyes, his tail wagging once. The bond between them was clear, a bond that had grown over the past few months of intense training. The final test was a complex search and rescue scenario. The trainers had hidden several victims, actors posing as people in distress, around the training area. The goal was for Scout to track and locate them, using the scent trails left behind. As the whistle blew, signaling the start of the exercise, Scout was off like a rocket, his nose to the ground and his eyes scanning the area with unyielding determination. Megan watched in awe as Scout navigated the obstacles, his movements fluid and precise. It was as though he had been doing this his whole life. The crowd around the training grounds held their breath as Scout worked through the course, overcoming each challenge with calm confidence. His ability to find the hidden victims was impeccable, his nose never faltering. He found them one by one, alerting Officer Clark with a gentle but firm nudge, each time leading him closer to victory. By the end of the exercise, Scout had completed the task with remarkable efficiency. Officer Clark stood tall, his eyes full of pride as he gave Scout a well-earned pat on the head. "He's ready," Officer Clark said, his voice filled with admiration. Megan's heart swelled with emotion. Scout had done it. He had passed the final test with flying colors. But more than that, he had proven something to everyone watching. He was more than just a rescued puppy. He was a dog with a purpose, a dog who had found his calling. As the crowd erupted in applause, Megan couldn't help but feel a tear slip down her cheek. Scout had come so far from the frightened little puppy left in a backpack at a train station. Now he was ready to serve, ready to make a difference. She knew, in that moment, that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, not only for Scout, but for the person who had once believed in him enough to let him go.